I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, this is my last meeting. Rob, could you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Zimmer?
Present.
Director Cody?
I'm here.
Director Gibson?
Here.
And Chairperson Ohelski?
Here. Okay, so do we have any comments, opening comments by committee members? No? Okay, moved on to consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments? No? Do you have anything to add, Rob, before I go to public comment?
Well, just that you'll see that the approval of the surveying budget coming through a little bit under budget there, and we'll have some good technical information on the actual elevation of many of the wellheads that we've been using, either topographic information, some of the digital terrain models that you see on Google Earth. So this will now be good to the quarter inch, and could tighten up some of our metrics. We don't expect major shifts, but I think this is a very good expenditure of funds.
Okay. Any question? Okay, any public comments on the consent agenda items?
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen. I would like to find out where we can find the minutes. I did a 10-minute search and couldn't find them anywhere, so it's hard to...
Yeah, absolutely. We're very proud of our minute. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No.
Just jumped right in, didn't I?
Let's see if we have any other public comments on the consent agenda, or pardon me, on the consent items first. Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment on the consent. Yes, now, Rob.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So if you go to slowcountywater.org, and in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see the Los Osos Basin Management Committee. And if you click on that, it has all of our agenda packages, and the minutes are normally published with the agenda package. And so you can just click on those. They'll be in PDF form, and you can scroll down and get the minutes. If you can't find them, you can also email me at rob.m@wallacegroup.us, or I have business cards up here. So for whatever reason, we want to make sure everybody can find our minutes, because it is a very good way to keep track of our meetings. Thank you, Lindy.
Okay. Yes.
Just one comment on the table. It looks like one of the wells is mislabeled as a Golden State Water well, but it should be a LOCSD Library Palisades well.
Are you talking about on the Twin Cities survey proposal?
Yeah.
We'll note that and get it corrected. Thank you.
Is that it then?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Very good. Thank you.
Also, one other thing. Just where was this in the budget, though? I don't see this as a budget item or anything like that. That is actually in our...
So this item was budgeted in the adaptive management item. If you look at we could pull it up on the screen, but there was a $15,000 allocation, $5,000 of it for survey, of which we're spending $3,500 with this effort. So I believe it's in the comments section of the budget, and let me just get that in front of me to make sure I respond to that appropriately. Yeah, so under item 4, adaptive management,
Okay.
groundwater modeling and wellhead surveying is what we called that.
Got it.
And we had $5,000 for surveying.
And it came in at 35.
Okay,
$3,500.
Not 35,000, 3,500.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the committee accept the consent agenda. Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Okay, Rob. We'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've provided a written summary of my thoughts, and I'll go through a brief mention of those for the benefit of the audience. So we provided a recap of some of the funding opportunities that we're pursuing, including the Stormwater Resource Plan, of which we're still waiting for the next phase on that. And then we went into some detail in response to a committee discussion last time into the zone of benefit analysis and the Joint Powers Authority. And so where this came up more recently is when you talked about the budget at your last meeting, there were several projects that crossed over in the county's mind, especially from just administration or monitoring into implementation. And those projects were flagged by county staff as being something that would be outside of what was contemplated in the original judgment. And we talked about that, and we'll go through that in more detail. So one of the options is to form a joint powers authority, and as a group we can then own assets like new wells or other new infrastructure items. We can own those. We can apply for grants as an entity and take other actions. However, with that comes a cost and a process. And we had agreed to bring back some examples from other joint power authorities that the county had formed, and county staff was kind enough to pull, I think, a very salient example from the Cuyama Basin, where they had formed kind of a simple JPA, had identified some of the costs of insuring that entity, because now it's a new entity and you have to carry your own insurance for that entity. We provided some examples of what those insurance costs were. Other than the cost of insurance, most of the operating expenses for that entity would be similar and theoretically piggybacked on what we already do here. You have a staff, you do Brown Act meetings, you do some financial administration, but you don't carry insurance because that's carried individually among your members. The cost of forming a JPA with all of the legal expense required to do that isn't covered here and hasn't been estimated because we really don't have a specific framework for that yet. But we do know that cost, that upfront cost, will be substantial because the diversity of entities here. For instance, Golden State as a PUC regulated entity can't directly participate in a JPA. They'd have to form like a mutual water company to do that. And so there would definitely be some substantial legal work that would be required in order to do that. In essence, the only difference between what you can do now as a Brown Act group and what you can do as a JPA would be those items that relate to the implementation of projects and the ownership of assets. So funding, grant work, and actually constructing those assets as an entity. I know the attorneys probably aren't ready to answer detailed questions on how exactly this could work out, but we did have a chance to provide you some general costing as to what the insurance has run in other examples. We did provide you an update on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the basin boundary modifications that have been in discussion. Similar status to last time, that DWR did approve 2 of the jurisdictional subbasins that staff had recommended, and they did were willing to exclude the Montana de Oro State Park area, and they denied a minor little fringe area that you see on the map there. And so we do expect here in April and May to actually see a prioritization of some of those subbasins. So what you might see, I don't know if Kathy or others from the county want to speak to this, is some of those carved out subbasins may become either medium or even low priority, and therefore not subject to a lot of the more challenging and cost prohibitive sections of SGMA.
Yeah, maybe I would like to have Kathy weigh in on that if she could.
Yeah, Kathy, you want to talk about any hints from DWR as to what those prioritizations might yield, low, medium to high?
It's hard. It was hard to follow that on the web, so I just appreciate your insight, being the person directly involved with it.
Sure. I'm Kathy Mark, County San Luis Obispo, Public Works. So basically, with the BBMR submittal to the state, they're looking at the reprioritization for the Warden Creek subbasin area. And right now, it's still pending their draft prioritization that should be out this spring. So we're just waiting on that to come out.
They don't give you any hints then?
No hints from them yet.
That's what I was asking for some inside info. But
no, they're very. I'm hearing it's coming out soon, though, the draft one. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I just put that up on the screen so the public can see. We're talking about the Warden Creek subbasin on the right side of the screen as being an area that we're interested as to what the state does with the priority of that area. Because if it's a low priority, you don't have this expensive process of preparing a groundwater sustainability plan like you do with the other areas. So that's what we're discussing here.
Okay, thank you.
We also gave you an update on the Los Osos wastewater project. Not a lot of change there. Flows have really sort of settled out at just under a half an MGD. I don't know if we'll actually break the half MGD barrier. I think we might when we connect Monarch Grove. That should be a shot in the arm. And so we might just crawl over half there. Still using Bay Ridge in a minor way and Broderson in a substantial way, and you have some year-to-date effluent totals there. And then we're down to the sort of the final unconnected properties, only about 100 left on the list, so it's getting quite close to full compliance there. Not a lot of water conservation rebate activity, just a few toilet rebates during the last reporting period. And then just continue to keep Morro Bay on your list and radar screen there. I check back with them every so often to see if there's anything that is of interest to Los Osos, and I'll bring that forward when there is such a thing. And then in response to our discussion last time, I provided a table to begin tracking off agenda items and where those sit. And so you can expect that table in future executive director reports, and that may grow and shrink as things get added or completed. And so be happy to answer any questions about the status of those items. And then attached you'll have the various examples of JPA discussions and insurance costs, and be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thanks for including the rehash of the information on the JPA, and I realize that we've seen this before, and it's very interesting. Related to that, it does seem difficult and maybe inappropriate for us to consider forming a JPA, but we have some issues maybe about the ownership of jointly funded test wells, things like that, and the associated ownership and liabilities for those things if we didn't form a JPA. Just like a little discussion about that.
Yeah, I think that's important. For instance, our program Seawell, if we constructed that facility, we've identified it as I guess you could call it a district-led project to date. The district has chosen to fund that. But at the end, if it looks like that's a good well, the parties say we want to participate materially in the financing of that well so that we can have a guaranteed amount of the flow. We could do that by agreement. There's some good local examples of that, like in Napomo, where you have the supplemental water project and all the parties agreed to contribute and share in the benefits of that project, even though the Napomo CSD fully owns those assets. So there's some good examples of ways we can do that by agreement. And you do perhaps lose a little bit of the sense of control with that, but you do get a guarantee of participation if you do it by agreement.
It's also smaller items like the Cuesta by the Sea monitoring well, for instance, which would never be a production well.
Would never be a production well. In that case, I think any public ownership would be appropriate at this point. It looks like the district would probably own that well, and there'd be some kind of an agreement back with the county if they're going to participate with partial funding on that through the CASGIM program. But the district would end up owning the asset, though the county could as well.
Thanks for the task list also that you put on there. It's very nice.
Thank you. Hopefully for me too.
So through the JPA, would the zone of benefit special tax still, we would benefit having a JPA if we decided to go that route for funding future projects. Is that correct? Doesn't that put us in a better position to grant funding, our special tax? Wouldn't we be able to be in a better position for pursuing that avenue? Because originally that was our avenue of how we were going to fund these projects. So is that still the thought of how to fund these projects or not?
I think you can fund projects, you can apply for grants, you can do everything you need to do with your current structure. You just have to have agreements on the back end to be able to have all the parties share in that asset, and there's other local examples of that. As you apply for grants, you could have letters of support, you could have Basin Management Committee actions that get taken in support of those grants. So you can do a lot of the same thing. You just can't jointly own the facilities. Now, when it comes to the special tax that we were considering, again, you could have the revenues from that special tax be carried by the county, be carried by the CSD, to the extent that it's within the CSD boundaries, which is the whole urban reserve line. So again, you could still get beneficial use of those funds, but I think directly applying those to a joint entity, if you're using those to fund things like monitoring and community assets, probably makes a little more sense to the average person. There's an entity, we're funding that entity, and they're accomplishing the project. So I think you can do it both ways, but the way the judgment is worded, it really did contemplate form the JPA, have the community-wide special tax, and then fund it that way.
All right. And then as far as the ownership, that would go under the BMC. As far as the monitoring well that we were just talking about, that would be a BMC-owned facility at that point?
The JPA would own it.
The JPA, yeah.
Right. So the four parties to the BMC would be...
Okay.
Right.
And so Golden State would need to form a mutual water company to be part of that JPA, or there could be another option where the county and LOCSD form the JPA, and we fit into that through a governing board, a seat on a board, and have participation in that way. There's a couple different mechanisms where, as we go down the process of forming the JPA, the mutual water companies and Golden State could fit into that.
Yeah, well said.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if Mr. Zimmer has any other questions or comments here.
Not on the JPA.
Yeah. If I could follow up on the JPA,
Sure.
I just talked to Mark a little bit ago. I appreciate the information about the JPA. I agree. I don't see a reason to form one right now. But considering the issues that the JPA might be created to solve, those issues are with us, and I think it should be a very high priority task for this committee to get the individual members of this committee to figure out, first of all, whether we need a JPA. There are some reasons we might want a JPA, because we do know we have costs that should be spread basin-wide, and that would provide, it's a mechanism. The JPA is just a mechanism. It's going to cost money, yes. I think the question we have to decide is whether it's worth the effort, or whether we can accomplish it in a more simple, less formally structured way. But out of this swirl of issues comes ownership, comes use of facilities that might be owned by one entity or another. it also raises the question of who's going to pay for what. And I think that we should really make a very strong commitment right now to get those things explicitly detailed out, to go down the list of the programs, including Program D, which is contemplating for future potential future development within the Los Osos area, and we should explore the necessary agreements to make all this work. We sort of just, I won't say shuffled along, because I know you work yourself hard here, but we've cruised along and picked off this and picked off that. I think we're on the threshold of needing a little more focus on this. And one of those issues is the upcoming update of the community plan for Los Osos, where the county is going to have to detail the water resources available for development in this part of the county. And we're going to need to be able to tell a story not only of today, but of 20 years into the future. And so we need to understand, we need to be able to explain to a variety of public entities how we can create a community plan that envisions a certain amount of development. And so I think we need to be a bit more precise, a bit more explicit in how the various items on the list are going to be funded. I think we need to identify those things, those costs that need to be spread over the entire basin, and some of those costs right now reside on residents only of the prohibition zone. We need to figure out how the financing is going to work when undeveloped properties eventually develop. And to me, what that's going to require is a concerted effort on the staff by the staffs of our different members here. And I'd like to suggest that we convene meetings of that staff in the interval between formal meetings of this committee itself. We've got such a variety of entities that sit at the table here. It's going to take some time to sort out how a CSD operates different from a PUC regulated company versus a small mutual water company, and how the county plays into this, I think, is going to be a really important role. I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Miller, that in terms of putting forward a zone of benefit, the county can run that assessment proposal forward. We would also then have to have some nature of the agreement about how those funds are distributed to the implementing agencies. I don't think that's insurmountable by any means, but I think it's time to start laying that out, and laying out what it would look like if we don't form a JPA, and laying it out what it would look like if we do form a JPA. Mm-hmm. So I would advocate very strongly for a significant commitment of our staff time to resolving those issues. Hopefully in the next 6 months would be a really important work product, I think. So I would hope that my colleagues here might support that approach.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was well said. And I think that, one of the tough discussions that are going to come before us is the new users in the basin, and that's going to come, and it has a cost to it, but there's also an opportunity there that, the existing users and all of us that have been in this room for many, many years solving the basin, and now you have a new user come on that has benefit from our past. But I think that if there's a way that they can contribute more than just their needs in a way that would help with some of these future projects and our concern of funding them, that's an opportunity that we should look at and explore. And I think our staff, like you mentioned, doing the work necessary to bring that before the board would be really helpful. And you can count on Golden State's support for that.
I would have to point out we don't have any staff other than Rob, so I think it's the staff of the...
More than good enough. More than good enough.
No. But I think it has to be the staff of the entities, not Rob.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's what I did mean, is each entity provide their staff.
Right.
So Bruce, that's a wonderful thing that you just brought up. Is there a way that you have in mind of capturing this in a relatively formal way for these future discussions you talked about?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we direct Rob to get the right staff people in the room before our next meeting. And I don't know what you're envisioning in terms of a month or 2 month lag between. So, somewhere in the next month to convene those folks, and I can, it might be helpful for each of us to line out a memo on what we see needs to be resolved. Not representing a water purveyor, I have a different set of interests and issues that regard the land use portions of these things. But I think that in the end it almost always comes down to money. So we know that money and time can solve the water supply issues of this part of the world, and we just need to find out what have we accomplished and what's ahead of us. Of what's ahead of us, how does that break out? Who reasonably should pay? How should it be owned? How should it be operated? All those things, and from that, let that drive then the structure, the proper governance structure. Whether it's a series of agreements that fill a binder, or, involve every cross thing, or one amendment to the stipulated judgment, or whatever the proper mechanism is. I think that comes out of that. And I wanted to hasten to emphasize that we're talking about the basin management plan as it was passed, but also the new projects, creek discharge, stormwater capture, all those things that we are contemplating need to be wrapped into that, as well as water conservation and the overall use of recycled water. So it's a big chunk to chew here, but I think it's fundamental to our purpose for being here, and it's time now to formalize it.
Well, let me ask a question on that, because I know the HCP has not been submitted yet, and we've been told it's not going to be submitted potentially until next year. So, that's what.
Go ahead. I'll respond to that.
But so I'm just talking about timing, because month seems a little short time frame to me to have to get this thing resolved.
So let me just, if I might, Mr. Chairman, let me say I didn't expect resolution in a month, although I'm sure Mr. Miller's capable of finding that resolution. But I think we need to start the process and keep it going. And
I agree with that.
I envision a 6-month project on this would be really good.
Okay.
It would give us a couple of meetings, an interim, so a meeting of staff within the next 30 days, a review of what we have there and further direction to staff 60 days from now, another meeting or 2 or 3 or however many it takes, and another visit to the committee here. The HCP was sort of, I envisioned the hand was poised to put it in the mail slot that was going to send it to Washington when the government shut down. And of course, the 35 days shutdown didn't produce 35 days of delay, it produced 70 days of delay. Right. But we are hopeful within the next 30 days that this will be cleared, and I am in contact with our staff and the Fish and Wildlife Service. We expect it to be on the Federal Register within 60 to 90 days, I would think. That starts its own.
Right.
Once it leaves our purview here, it starts its own clock, and my attention then turns very, very strongly to the water issues that are then part of the community.
Well, so I think from a realistic point of view, if we could get an update in our next meeting, which will be 2 months from today, basically, I think that would be a realistic time frame for you to get all the entities together and the parties together to get a basic outline put together of the tasks that need to be accomplished.
Absolutely. I think that's a fair schedule.
Appreciate it.
I think we can do it.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I know county staff is listening, and I'm sure they're fully committed, as well as Golden State staff.
They're shaking their head. I'm not sure whether it's this way or that.
Yes.
Plenty of time. Plenty of time.
They heard this rant yesterday, so.
Perfect.
So if I understand, then this effort by members of various staffs would produce a memo of recommendation that would come back to this board? And that's how we would get around the Brown Act issues about meeting outside of...
Right, so they'd have until our next meeting to put together just an outline of their thoughts, and then we would give them direction at that meeting of how to proceed.
All along, yeah, because I don't want to go too far down a road on this, because we certainly could choose the wrong path.
Well, it's like you did, the New Cuyama thing, where it laid out the pros and cons, and then for the insurance it laid out the 3 different options.
Right.
But that's the kind of stuff then we can get that to us early in the process, and then we can choose a path forward and then refine that path as we move along.
Right. Right.
And go down the list of issues: water conservation, recycled water use, test wells,
or whatever,
monitoring wells, whatever they are. How are we going to execute on that, and who's going to pay?
It really becomes the next sort of generation of our discussions, which to date have been focused on monitoring, get everything set in place, we know where we're at, tracking projects, moving forward. Now, the true implementation, I guess, is really the budget discussion kind of raised this up.
Exactly.
And now the community plan also.
Right.
Well, when you talk about the update on the status of the basin plan infrastructure projects, that would be something that would be part of the discussions. You have all those, the program A, B, C, D, et cetera, things in there, who's funding them, what the capital costs are, the status, the parties involved, et cetera. So I would see that as your basic outline of what you're going to...
Yeah, and so these are implementing agreements. We're really looking for what the implementing agreements are.
I think that's very appropriate. I like it.
Thanks.
All right, we'll close. We'll bring public comment then.
So we just talked about the JPA, but other things in the staff report?
If you have something else.
Well, yeah, just minor comments. The basin boundary modification request, so a GSA will be formed if they're not reprioritized, whether they are or aren't. Is that the plan?
Depends.
Well, and I could let Kathy speak to that. They are still part of the Los Osos Basin. It's a sub-basin. Right. It'll be covered by the county's GSA, but that's all it should need. And then how much work that GSA needs to do is to be determined by the priority that's assigned to it, as I understand the process.
So was the basis of the reprioritization, was that because of scientific findings or more of a jurisdictional?
Kathy, you'll have to answer that one.
Yeah.
Sorry. Should have asked why you were
Or I
up
could
here.
grab the guy next to you to come up.
I'm not leading. Go ahead.
Kathy Martin, Public Works. So the prioritization by DWR is based because of the boundary modifications for this round. So they're looking at all the aspects for this sub-basin-wide, and basically they're going to re-examine it and reprioritize it to very low, low, or medium, or high. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is new to me, this concept of sub-basins of the Los Osos Basin. Am I understanding correctly that some of these basins that are being divided off are, like the Warden Creek sub-basin, are a sub-basin of the Los Osos Basin?
So you have the Los Osos Valley Groundwater Basin, and now we formed 2 sub-basins. So you have the Los Osos Area Sub-Basin and the Warden Creek Sub-Basin.
If you look up, I think,
so
up there, I think.
So is there a hydrological?
Yes, so we have geology. So the jurisdiction basin boundaries based off geology, hydrogeology, between the 2 different sub-basins. We had to do jurisdictional because DWR said that would be the most preferred approach to be accepted. So which is why we did jurisdictional basin boundaries.
So I have a political question which isn't really directed at you, but perhaps at the committee is, the sub-basins, are they represented then by the Basin Management Committee? Or they're going to be represented separately by their own management organization?
So another reason why we did the jurisdictional, because the adjudicated management area is located, well, the Los Osos area sub-basin is located within the adjudicated management area. So that the entity there is the BMC.
And is thus exempt from SEQA, from
Sigma.
From
Yeah.
Sigma.
And so the Warden Creek sub-basin was a fringe area. It's an unmanaged area that the county had to form a GSA over. So the entity over that area, Warden Creek sub-basin, is the county as the GSA. So there's two distinct entities for each sub-basin. Thank you.
You weren't involved in those discussions, but
Well,
we
I've been
spent a
in
lot of
meetings.
time talking about that.
Yeah, I've been monitoring the Warden Creek sub-basin meetings, and I am familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's just, I guess I hadn't noticed before that they were sub-basins.
Yeah, yeah,
That were all sub-basins.
because it's not a common, like she said. Okay, any other questions?
Just one other comment on the conservation. I think we briefly touched on that, but there was a chamber event where there was a business expo, and the district and Golden State participated in that. I thought it was just worth noting. You know, there was a contest with the elementary school and
Water conservation.
Water conservation. Yeah. So I think there's also a follow-up meeting
Video.
that's going to come out of that.
Right.
But then isn't there going to be another meeting in June? I thought that they were proposing another conservation outreach that we're going to have in June from that event. So my understanding is that there is, because I've seen some activity from Golden State
Yes.
participating in that. All right. And so we'll bring more back on that on our May meeting to announce that. I think, we're taking our conservation off of our budget, out of our budget. Thought it would be helpful to bring these types of things during comment period.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Okay, we'll go to public comment on the executive director's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I'd like to briefly speak to the executive director's report, specifically with regard to this governance notion. And I would respectfully submit that this Basin Management Committee and your existing framework can accomplish everything you need to accomplish in the foreseeable future. I don't think we need more government, another layer of government, or additional expanded entities at all. At the end of the day, we've got really two small water companies and a mutual, Golden State, LOCSD. That's it. And we really don't have a lot of projects to complete. We know about one additional program, Seawell. It's virtually funded, or most of it is. So the idea of more governance, more layers of bureaucracy, more cost, it just isn't what this community and this small basin needs. This is a small basin. Our safe yield at the end of the day is going to be about 3,000 acre feet a year. And so I'd subscribe to the KISS principle, and certainly in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindio, and I kind of have to agree with Mr. Edwards. I think that as long as things are going smoothly and we are a small basin, the more complicated we want to make it, the more it costs. And I just think we can work things out better the way we are currently doing it. So I would support keeping it simple.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else comment on the executive director's report? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back. Any additional questions, comments? None? Nope. No. Do we want to do a receive and file just for the record?
Sure.
Sure.
I make a motion we receive and file the executive director's report.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Sorry, I just wanted to get it on the record, Rob.
Very good.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 7, the action items. First one is A, update on the status of the Basin Plan infrastructure projects.
Thank you. This is our normal update where we go through the individual projects, and this, as you said previously, would become the framework for talking about implementation and governance going forward. I'll just give a brief update for the public here, but it's all in writing and available online. The district's 8th Street Upper Aquifer well is again drilled, cased, 100% designed, and we're just waiting for that little piece of grant funding to come in. And I saw that in a week or so here, there's another step to that grant. We think we're very competitive for it and could provide up to a 1-to-1 match on that project. So thank you for the patience as you've watched that march forward. I hope by our May meeting we'll have something more concrete that we can actually put that out to bid and put that project to bed. We have a number of completed projects that we had talked about previously. Did want to give a quick reminder to the community that Program B as in boy, is the development of the upper aquifer and the removal of nitrate where necessary to be able to produce from that aquifer. And we really are already doing that both in the district system and the Golden State system. So we have some seedling progress on Program B, and that will be something that you will definitely hear about in the future as we talk about the Los Osos community plan. We do have at least one additional infrastructure project that we've been talking about, and that is the second expansion well under Program C. That's a lower aquifer expansion well. And where that project currently sits is we have a test well that's been designed and laid out by Cleith Harris at the Los Osos Middle School. The middle school has now a document which describes the exact location of that and the logistics of drilling that test well, and if there was to be a future production well there, where that would go. And so you're going to see potentially even at the school board level some discussion to approve that. It is on their property, even though it's in public right-of-way. They own to the center of that right-of-way. So that's been provided to the school, and we'll provide updates on that effort going forward. We did change the parties involved column. I don't know if you caught that when you reviewed the agenda, but we're now saying that LOCSD is currently leading the project with potential Golden State Water and S&T involvement, depending on final locations. So we just left that open for all the purveyors here, if that was to be a future effort that we wanted to take on in common. And then we talked about the Cuesta by the Sea monitoring well. We did get approval of the minor use permit and are through the appeal period. Nobody protested the Cuesta by the Sea monitoring well. It got approved quite readily. And we're in encroachment permits for that with the County Public Works Department. And we think those are going to come out here any day. And then we're going to send that out to bid and bring you back bid numbers on that. So the bid documents have already been prepared. We're just waiting for our encroachment permit to move forward. And then Program U, water reinvestment. We talked about the creek discharge program, and that continues to be an item on your draft 2019 budget, which is the subject of another agenda item. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Go ahead.
Thanks for the new column about parties involved, and I have a question about that with regards to the community nitrate removal facility. S&T would be interested at least in learning how these discussions are going. We're not involved right now, but we'd like to be able to send staff to any meetings that are being held about that community facility. We're eventually going to need nitrate removal, or at the very least an intertie with removed nitrate because of our increasing nitrates in our production wells. So I'd like to know how S&T could be involved and perhaps have our staff involved in the discussions about that community nitrate facility.
Yeah. So right now, there's no current project being pursued to expand the nitrate removal facility that's been built. However, if that does get on the books, and I think it will come up under the context of this new framework that we're going to be talking about, we would absolutely involve you in that. And also remind the committee that one of my action items will be to fully understand nitrate contamination within our aquifer systems here. The mechanisms are generally understood, but that's one of your adaptive management items that will be done this year. We're already talking about scope on that, and that you should see that again in May.
One more comment, since you brought that up. Also, if you could include in that investigation about the future of nitrate removal, I think we'd all be very interested in the future of brine removal, which is related to that, and the permitting and the lifespan of these permits for brine removal.
Very good.
Good.
Public comment item, public comment on this item 7A, the update on the status of the basin plan infrastructure projects.
Thank you, BMC. My name is Barry Brannon, and talking about looking at your goals, your immediate goals that are spelled out, I look at the immediate goals. Item 2 is provide a sustainable water supplies for existing residential, commercial, community, and agricultural development overlying the basin. 2 weeks ago, I attended the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee. They call it the WRAC, and I'm sure many of you are aware of it. And at the meeting, Andy Pease, I believe that's her name, spelled out the fact that there is state money that has been allocated for this group. They're looking for projects that would be flood control type projects that would be beneficial. And so I'm suggesting that if indeed the BMC wanted to supplement the water we have, we've had about 3 months of rain with 20 inches of water going in the ocean every day, and it would be opportune to have some water, groundwater recapture. And to be able to define what and where and how to do that, it'd be nice to have some money. So I'm suggesting that the group ask for, through that committee, to get the money, you need to have a person or a group that would benefit to come to the WRFCAT and say, hey, I have this neat project and I'd like to have some funds to study it. And so I'm suggesting at this time perhaps this group think about how they can capture some of those funds to perhaps study how you can capture some of the groundwater. I took a walk here a week ago along the edge of the old county dump, and there's a large, I'm going to call it a small river, running at the toe of the slope at the dump. There was so much water, I was just really amazed. And it appears that this perched aquifer that's defined in some of your charts is surfacing right there at the toe of the slope. And I think that's the primary source, or a lot of the biggest source of water that's going out Trury Road. So I think there's a lot of places you can study, and I'm just suggesting if you need money to study it, perhaps that's a source.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Okay. Close public comment on this. Yeah, I would point out for the speaker's benefit that the CSD is a member of the RAC, so we did attend that meeting, and we are members, and you want to touch base on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think the idea of stormwater recovery and having seed funds to really flesh that out, I think, is a very important concept for this committee, and so I agree those funds should be pursued.
Yeah, I think it's something that, Mr. Cecina is our representative, so we have a Utility Advisory Committee meeting this afternoon. I'll bring this up with him. So
very good.
All right, thank you. All right, Rob, we'll move on to 7B.
Thank you. 7B is the discussion of a report that you've seen a number of times, and the report with the unusually long name, the On Los Osos Basin Plan Metric Trends Review and Infrastructure Program C Evaluation. And we've been through a number of different iterations on this report. And I know Cleith Harris was appreciative of the comments and the interaction received over time. Staff feels like now would be an appropriate time as we roll into a focus on an annual report cycle. We're well into that effort. That now would be a good time to provide a final red line and call this report final in its current form. We did receive a letter from the CSD requesting some edits to the report. Those edits have been made, and a red line has been attached, so you can see specifically what those were. We strengthened some of the discussion of the need for one additional lower aquifer well on the east side under water system reliability, and you can see that discussion in the red line that was added. And we further included a lot of the baseline information on seawater intrusion mitigation and how those factors interplay with the recycled water methods of distribution. And then there's a few other edits and tweaks to make the report stronger. It is certainly a lot stronger than when it was first drafted, and staff is ready to final the report if the committee is ready to do that. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think the red line comments or edits were good, especially that table 1, I think, was a good edit to include in there.
Just one question, if I might. The comment that the question of any borehole contamination to be answered by or discussed in the annual report. Are we going to have the definitive analysis of that by the time of the annual report?
Yeah, that will be in your annual report.
Good.
Other
Let's do
questions? Okay, public comment then on this item? The edits to the Cleith Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards, and something so simple as the question that was posed turned into something enormous and transpired over the last 7 months. I can't quite figure it out. The question, as you know, is do we need 1 or 2 more Program C wells? 3 are recommended in the basin plan. Golden State has installed 1 at their Los Olivos office. So again, the question is, do we need 1 or 2? The good news is we only need 1. But we're not doing it. We need to get going on it. And you heard from your executive director that there's a test well going over at Pismo. But let's get this done. We've been dragging our feet way too long. This is almost not the final step in the plan, but it will get us very close to where we need to be in terms of the numbers. In the public comment, I'll go into the numbers in a little bit more detail. But let's get off Palisades. The CSD has been on Palisades. They need to get off. And this second and final Program C well should allow for that. So let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment, bring it back. I personally think we've edited enough at this point. I think we should just move it along.
Second.
So just for clarification, though, the second program well is the one that we were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it is being done. I mean, it's
being
not,
pursued.
Well, it's in the process.
being pursued, yeah.
Painful. It's slow, but yeah.
It takes time.
It takes time. Okay, so I'm making a motion, second by Bruce.
Sorry, second.
Any other discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and all in favor?
Aye.
Favor.
Okay, so you can get Cleith Harris to finalize this and start moving forward on the annual report.
I will do that.
Thank you.
They'll be happy about that. Mr. Chair.
Okay, section 7C, or pardon me, item 7C, the adoption of the Basin Management Committee annual budget.
Yes, and I will just, in case folks, the text won't be very big because it's a little difficult to see there, just so folks have something to look at. So this is a discussion of your your 2019 calendar year budget. I know some of you are on fiscal years, but this is a calendar year. And when we discussed this last time, a concern was raised primarily by the county, and fairly so, that the judgment didn't necessarily contemplate some of the more implementation-focused projects. And what you had done at your last meeting is you approved the first 7 items of your budget, which took you through your administration, preparation of an annual report, your monitoring and your adaptive management, and a little bit for grant writing. So you stopped there last time, and that was good. We did have some follow-up discussions, staff to staff, in an attempt to look at the remaining items to see what could be done to move those forward. We believe we've made substantive progress on those as outlined in the staff note. And I'm just going to go through and describe each of the 4 items and talk about their disposition. And then you could either today adopt one or more of these items, and there may be further questions since we're really sticking our toe in a little bit of new territory here. So I didn't want to rush it forward, but let me go through each one so you can understand how.
Could I make a suggestion for those in the audience that if you go back one page, because where the 4 items are spelled out,
I think that's a good.
I think it's a lot clearer. Yes. I think it's a lot more legible there.
Let me zoom that in a little bit too so you can see it. And there's your 4 items. So the first is item 8, the creek recharge and replenishment studies. Now this was viewed as, again, given the magnitude of the effort, as more of an implementation type of project. And the way that we thought we'd approach this is that the county, in order to not get sideways with what the stipulation said, they would contribute some of their key monitoring, lab testing, and other efforts that they're undertaking at the water reclamation facility currently, and that would act as their 20% match to this replenishment study effort. And everybody would then have the remaining pro rata portion of that to advance the actual studies that were contemplated in the budget.
Right, Rob, if you could maybe shrink that down just a notch, because in lieu is not there.
Sure.
Lieu's there, but not in.
Yes, let me do that. Oh, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So basically, in that particular item, they would not be paying money out of pocket, but they'd be providing in lieu services.
Right, staff, lab, and other items that they're doing as part of the ownership of the wastewater reclamation facility. For the Cuesta by the Sea monitoring well, item 9, this is approached in a different fashion. The county looked at alternate funding sources for this, and through their CASGIM program, which is a statewide program providing online geo-referenced well data, water level data throughout the state, that this monitoring well is a good candidate for that program. And therefore, the county was able to find its share of funding through CASGIM for this well. Now, that's going to require an agreement with the ultimate owner of the well, which would be, in this case, I believe it would be the district. But that's something that can be done. And under our current approach, if you do approve item 9, we'll again go get bids on this as soon as we have our permits. We'll bring that back. Before we award that contract, the county would enter into that agreement to be able to fund its share of that well. So we want to thank county staff for being flexible and creative in the way they approach that. And item 10 was essentially a study phase for stormwater and perched water recovery. You heard that come up a little earlier in the discussion. And again, the county would look to contribute in lieu services to that. Their input's going to be very critical at the staff level to look at managing that water once it's delivered to the wastewater collection and treatment system. And so they would commit that staff time to do that, but wouldn't actually be paying the consultant, so to speak. And then item 11, we thought it prudent that we'll go ahead and drop that off of this committee's budget. That will remain on the various budgets of its member entities. The county runs a rebate program. The purveyors have their own internal conservation plans, and you would continue to do that. We'll report out on that as being a consolidated forum to do that, but we won't carry it as a specific line item. And so that's how we contemplated moving these items forward, and perhaps we could take each one in order, take comments item by item as you see fit.
I think from big picture point of view, I think we should just move forward with the whole item, quite frankly, unless somebody has some questions.
Great.
With approval of the whole item?
Well, we got to have public comment first.
Well, yeah. Do you want to do public comment first or
Yeah.
board comment? Okay.
Okay, public comment on the budget.
Lindy Owen, could you explain how in lieu commitment from the county would work? I don't quite know if they just put in 6 hours and then everybody else has to pay a flat amount. I'm confused about that. Conservation, we talked about a county rebate program that doesn't seem to be present in any information to the community. So again, conservation is falling to the wayside completely on all parties. So what the CSD and Golden State are trying to put together for this little, school event, I'm just curious whether anybody thinks this is truly making a difference in how people are conserving and what advances we're making. I think we're at a standstill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, close it and bring it back. Okay, Mr. Zimmer, did you have a comment, motion, whatever?
Well, yeah, I don't know how to approach it, all the comments at one time, but really the structure of how our budget's laid out, I think that if we've taken and approved the first 7 items, I think that we should structure this in a way that the other projects and items are brought to another section of this sheet, so it's not all combined in one. And I think that would give clarity to the public comment we just heard. Really didn't know exactly how the in lieu contributions would be outlined in a budget format. So for Golden State to commit to these funds, I don't know. I didn't see any reduction in the cost of the projects. So you mentioned that there would be their 20% contribution through sampling and things like that. I didn't see that the project reduced by that 20%. And if it is or isn't, we just need to clarify that. And that's why I'm saying we bring that down to a separate section where if Golden State's going to be responsible for more than that, their 38%, we need to know that too. So we're not clear on what we're agreeing to at this point.
Right, good. You would be capped at the 38% of those items, but I think we could make that more clear.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, in that second last line on the spreadsheet there, it talks about includes 13.7 of in lieu staff services for items 8 and 10. But I agree with what you're saying. It's not clear how that's being credited to us.
Right. And so the Quested by the Sea, the monitoring well, the comment says that the well ownership's to be determined, but we've talked about the district owning that well. Really haven't been privy to any of that conversation to understand that. I thought that was something that we were going to discuss further through the JPA or some activity. So
True. I mean, it's the discussions have been here. There's not been any individual discussions since we haven't gone out to bid on it yet. But once you have numbers, if it looks like it's in your budget range, then I think it will have to be publicly owned. So I think we have one of two options there if we're going to do it before any JPA is formed.
Okay. And then if there is the CASGIM aspect of it, what if we could get a number is that part of that 13,700 figure that was mentioned there?
It would be 20% of the 115.
Oh yeah, because they're going to contribute there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe that one can go up to the original first 7 projects because it's paid for the same as the other 7 projects. So it doesn't need to be brought down to.
Yeah, we could keep it on the top level. Yeah, agreed.
And then the stormwater, we mentioned that in the executive report that there was a ranking that the county had. Do we know what that ranking is and where we fall? Is there going to be a reduction in cost because of that ranking?
The project ranked well. We don't have funds for it yet, but I think it's competitive. They get more competitive as you advance them. It's pretty conceptual right now.
And so when will we get more information on exactly where we rank with that?
I think you'll get more this year, but it's not going to move. It's not a fast-moving train. If you want to dive into the detail on that, I think you need to commit some funds to it.
So, I think we have to leave the budget this way, and then if we get the funding, then we can reduce the budget.
Was I incorrect in assuming that $5,000 is for grant management? That's what I assumed.
Item 7, which was approved last time, is for grants. Right. Item 10 was to do actually some of the technical work to further flesh out stormwater recovery.
Okay.
Where exactly it would occur, how the flows would be managed, the water quality, maybe a little sampling. So it was going to be technical work.
May I? Are you done? Or
just 1 second. So the 15,000 total is for the technical work, or is that part of it?
No, it's for the technical work because the grant has already been. We've already put that in the grant program, in the stormwater resource plan, and we have enough money in our overall administrative budget to keep that moving forward. Okay. But our conceptual work on that is very high level. It's probably not sufficient to be competitive for the implementation phase of a grant. So we want to advance that to, if not shovel ready, at least further defined.
So is that funds you need today is that something that our working group can flush out and determine those costs and what our contributions are going to be?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair question to all your comments. Yeah. Do any of these are so time sensitive that you feel compelled to take action today? I don't think there's any that fall into that category. You already approved your annual report. That was time sensitive. Right. You're going to go out to bid on the monitoring well. So we have funds to do that already. Mm-hmm. And so we can bring this back, maybe work staff to staff a little bit to clarify. Okay. One of the public speakers was asking about the in lieu fee. I think we can put a little more flesh on those bones and talk about specifically what those services are, how that value will be accounted for, and tighten this up a little bit if you like, because you're not really a 2-month holdup's not gonna hurt us on that.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to make extra work for staff, but in terms of implementation projects, it might be useful to have a one-pager on each one that indicates timeline, budget, location, expected results. This is something we've seen SLOCOG do in terms of transportation.
Mm-hmm. I know that form, yes.
Yeah. So just to keep it clear, and it does seem an ideal topic for the staff-to-staff meetings we were talking about a while ago.
Good. I like that.
Okay, if I understand correctly, we want to just stay with the adopted budget from 1 through 7 and bring back 8 through 11 and reformatting the spreadsheet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's what staff understands.
Anybody? That's where we want to go? Everybody in concurrence?
Yes, I agree with that, along with one other comment.
Okay, go ahead.
The S&T board examined this in some detail, this budget, and has a question they wanted me to bring up about grant proposal efforts. They wonder if we're underfunding grant proposal efforts here at the BMC, if this amount of money is truly enough for what we need to be spending on that.
I think it's a fair question. We had a consultant that we brought on board previously, and they were able to undertake at least the available programs that we are aware of to help us get through a submission of those items. If we have specific grant pursuits that we think need more money, we'll bring those back to you and say, this is going to be a more expensive specific item. This is just general grant research for us. So I don't know that we have a great answer to that, but I could tell you if we felt like there was a program that was ideal for us, we wouldn't just say, well, we only have $5,000, we can't pursue it. We'd come back to you and say, we need more money to really be competitive on this new program, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I guess my comment isn't really about are we not spending enough money, but is there really enough effort being made to investigate grants for some of these projects like the creek recharge and the stormwater projects, for instance? Those are important projects.
They are, yeah. I mean, I think we have our finger on the major funding sources of those. But of course, that's from one lens, right? I mean, maybe I'm not seeing the full breadth of what we could be pursuing.
I would think in response to that, our county staff, working both as the county and as the flood control district, does a lot of this through integrated regional water management and all the other programs. And I'll certainly pledge as much support from them in this general arena as we possibly can muster. So I feel pretty comfortable that we do understand the breadth of opportunity here.
Okay, all right. So with that understanding, then we'll move on to 7D, which is the draft request for qualifications to take Mr. Miller's job.
Did we need to accept this budget?
We already did that.
Oh, we did
We
that.
did 1 through 7 already.
Yes, but the rest of it we're not going to.
We're going to do that. I thought that's what we were doing.
A little more work on
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
8 through 11.
Sorry.
8 through 11 next time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Rob, the draft RFQ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a chance to draft, as I had mentioned last time, a request for qualifications for a permanent executive director. And I've provided a copy of that, and I'll just go through some of the steps that would be necessary. First of all, this is your first shot at this. I thought perhaps you could give me feedback over the next number of weeks, and we'll bring it back as a final in the next meeting. I've also sort of put the word out to the consulting community that this is coming, and let them know that it's available online to look at and provide some input. And then in May, we would approve the final RFQ and then get proposals back in June. And then I would hope that you would convene a non-Brown Act subset of this group. I can get some legal counsel help on that to help me on the interviews and have some initial interviews with the most qualified applicants, and then look to select in as early as August, with the hope that in your October and December meeting, perhaps I could just shadow the meeting, and maybe I'll comp the meeting. I'll still run the meetings through the end of the year, but they might want to be involved as we get towards the end of the year here. This is just a draft framework, how I was thinking it would lay out. And then they would assume their full duties in January of 2020. And so you can see the request for qualifications and the scope that we've contemplated. We've also been clear with our budget expectations, though we might find out that the dollars that have been allocated aren't sufficient for other consultants to provide the same role. I hope not, but that could be the case. And so I'll be happy to answer any questions on the actual RFQ that's been drafted or the process that staff has laid out. And then over the next couple of weeks, I'd expect your feedback both on this document and on potential consultants or individuals that you think would be well qualified to pursue this position.
Go ahead. Anybody? Nope.
Yeah, I understand how this would be more friendly, the way that you're presenting this, the interview process be relatively private with fewer people instead of having an executive meeting of this board to conduct the interviews. It appears, though, that accepted candidates would appear for the first time before the board after going through private interview processes that wouldn't involve each entity.
I think that's correct, though we could certainly bring them here. Maybe.
Well, I think, having done this a number of times, the idea would be you'd go through an initial cutting period, whatever you want to call it, a review period, because if you had 40 applicants, you're not going to interview all 40. So that would be going through and then cutting it down to the number of appropriate candidates who then would be done by the whole board.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah.
I'm unsure how extensive the response will be.
You don't anticipate 40 applicants?
And it may be that they all come to the entire board, but we'll have to see how that plays out. That's just the unknown at this point.
I do have several consultants that have already expressed interest. There will be some.
Very good.
Okay. So your thought process is that this is out there as a draft, and then prior to our next meeting, you get comments and come back with a red line draft.
That's right.
For us.
And we'll approve it at the next meeting. So.
Okay. Public comment on this item?
I seem to be the only commenter.
You're doing great.
Anyway, Lindy Owen again. I wanted to ask if, just a rough idea, I don't really know how many hours a month you more or less spend at the job. I would not encourage asking for a higher salary. I think we are needing to tighten our belts everywhere. We're starting to, lose sight of how much money there is in the world for our particular needs. And then I also kind of urge that we look at people that are familiar with our basin, or at least with the way basin management works, because it's sort of a new area that we're looking at. I think we have a couple of excellent people. One person in particular that's in the room right now that I think would be excellent. So anyway, and will you be picking, does this go just within the county because it is sort of a localized issue, or because it's not a full-time job, correct? So it would be somebody that's an engineer currently working in the area, I think that...
Or they could be somebody that's moving here. That's something to be seen.
There you go. Okay. Just a little curiosity about it, because we're going to miss you for sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, bring it back. So I think the idea is over the next few weeks, we just get our comments to Rob. Okay. And then Rob will come up with a revised draft, and we'll approve that with final edits at our May meeting.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, it is a very part-time effort as you're advertising this to qualified consultants and individuals. It takes me, maybe 8 to 12 hours a month, something like that. And the minutes are prepared by Nat Velez, who does a great job on our minutes, by the way. So we expect detailed minutes from the new person. So it's part-time. It's not too burdensome.
And very rewarding.
It's extremely rewarding. I'm hoping that somebody who has some investment in Los Osos will take interest as well, because it is, it's not a large fee, and it needs to be somebody who's willing to come in here and do it. And then I can sit in the audience. That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so that would bring us then to the last item other than public comment for the items not on the agenda, 7E, update on the status of the recycled water contracts with the agricultural properties.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an item that came up at the last meeting, and you did put it on the agenda just for a status update. And we want to thank county staff for giving us sort of the state of the union there as it comes to these various recycled water contracts. So based on the current flows that are at the plant, we do expect to be in the, we'll call it the 560 acre foot per year zone for the annual availability of recycled water for current development. And in January we talked about it briefly, but we did go through this in some fine detail back in 2018. In our January meeting there was a staff report that was prepared and a discussion that occurred, and a letter from the CSD to the county that was authored and sent in response to that discussion. I've included all those exhibits with my staff notes so you can see the history. Exhibit A is basically a summary, and I'll just throw that up on the screen here so folks have it. So these are the current agricultural contracts as they sit today, and those are the amounts that have been contemplated. And then I would note that only one of those parties has installed much of the infrastructure necessary to actually convey the water that's contemplated, and the county is currently working on sort of perfecting these arrangements. Also, while we have urban contracts, no water has been delivered for those either, and I'll just scroll up there to show you. The school retrofit process is fairly intensive, both time intensive and dollar intensive, and we do believe that the first to come online will be Sea Pines, which could be as soon as next month or even this month, able to use that water for the golf course. And then the next focus item will be the Los Osos Middle School, which has the largest turf area, most significant irrigation demand, and that should be complete with all the retrofits in place necessary August of this year. And then you'll see, as resources and staff time become available, you'll see each school get retrofitted one after the other, probably with either Baywood or Monarch coming next. And so you'd have in Exhibit B the previous staff report that talked about the context of the coastal development permit process. If you remember, the CDP had a reservation for agriculture in its conditions, and that got passed forward into the county's planning process. But this document gives you a summary of where we currently sit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is it correct for me to assume that these contracts between the county and the ag recipients of this water are confidential and not available for review?
I think they're publicly available.
No, they're approved by the board. The Board of Supervisors approved them.
Yeah, publicly
So they're
available.
public documents.
I did want to also note that the previous staff reports and discussions on a property-by-property basis, we don't have those for you here today. But for the most part, the growers that did not have sufficient water for the cropping that they wanted to accomplish were the growers who had expressed interest in the program. And I think there is additional interest on behalf of folks who have existing well supplies, but the items that are up there are folks who didn't have sufficient water supplies, and that was a lot of the genesis of their interest.
I have one other question. I'm curious if there was ever a county response to the letter to Mr. Peshong from the CSD.
You have Mark Hutchinson's memo attached in our staff report here.
Yeah, the memo to Mr. Peshong from the CSD came after that, though, and it's asking questions in rebuttal to the information in Hutchinson's.
At a point, I can comment on where we are on it. The county's position is pretty clear, and we've discussed this numerous times, and can outline how we intend to proceed at appropriate point.
Maybe just to add some context for folks who haven't reread the memo, the county's position was that they were conditioned to provide an allocation of agricultural water in mitigation of the taking of ag for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant. And that that's the county's perspective as it currently sits, and that's not changed since the January 18 memo.
Yeah, and I mean, if I understand this correctly, the county's interpretation, as Mark said, is that 10% of agricultural land, but not 10% of irrigated agricultural land, just 10% of
10%
agriculture.
at least 10% of the effluent, by condition of the wastewater
Right.
plant permit. We are required to send at least 10% of the treated effluent to agriculture.
Right.
And the condition that's based on quite clearly says that we're seeking voluntary agreements with users for that water that work to the maximum extent possible to have good effect on the basin. We have an option to go through Section 13550 of the Water Code to compel agricultural users to use recycled water if it's available, but we chose it very explicitly not to go through that rather onerous and assuredly contentious process to try to force this at this point. So we're looking for the best we possibly can. Out of the 4 that you see up there, staff was relating to me that Goodwin, set to take 10 acre-feet, is actually over the basin and is actually pumping water right now. So there is some offset there that's going to occur. And again, this issue's come up many times, and the county's been very clear in response to this. We understand we'd like to put that recycled water where it can do the most benefit, but we're under this condition of the Coastal Commission, and the arrangements that we've made here are the best the best under the voluntary situation. I do not support, and there's no one in the county that supports going back to try to change that condition at the Coastal Commission to make it any different, because we fully expect to be still on the hook for mitigating the taking of ag land for the construction of that wastewater project. And at this point, that would only subject our staff to an extensive process of trying to figure out what else might we do, time, money, and energy spent that way. So that said, we go back to the principle that we want to do the best. We want to have the best effect on the basin we can of that water. Right now, it's certainly my position and the position of the board by approving the contracts that it had, that based on the good faith negotiations that we've had with these owners, I think it's appropriate to go ahead with a 5-year period of delivery to those owners, and they will understand that at the point of 5 years down the line, if we have a better place to put that water, for instance, creek discharge or direct potable reuse, or any number of other possibilities, we very well may not continue deliveries there. I think the other important thing to understand is that the ability to correct the problems in this basin does not depend on where this 65 acre-feet of water goes. And we've seen that in 2 annual reports now, where chloride metrics are coming down, where well levels are coming up, and where we're pumping the basin at 80% of its sustained yield. So whereas, yes, we would like to see maximum benefit of this water, we are constrained right now. It is not impeding our ability to accomplish the goals of the Basin Management Plan. And so forth, from, again, speaking just as one supervisor, it's my intention to continue with what we had negotiated with these folks for a 5-year delivery schedule, and we'll reevaluate after that.
Well, I think the important thing, as you mentioned, is that the 10% delivery to agriculture was not predicated to
No.
It was for agriculture. It was an offset for the removal of this land from agriculture.
Right.
That was the reason for this particular condition.
Exactly.
But I did have a question, and I don't know, Bruce, if you know this, but it says that the Michener contract has not been executed. Do you know what that?
We have not been in contact with that particular landowner, and I asked staff to do a little investigation on that, and whether we execute it or not sort of remains to be seen. We don't really know what that particular
So that's unknown
party
at this
is.
point. Okay.
Yeah, it's unknown at this point.
So just for trying to clarify that.
Yeah.
One more just clarification. So the 5-year term, is that from when the contracts were signed, or when
Well,
they?
we could do, yes, we could terminate the contract 5 years after it was signed, leaving them without any. But as you indicated, at least one has gone to the trouble of putting in infrastructure. The understanding, if not the black letter of the contract, the understanding, the good faith that we exercised in negotiating with is that we would be delivering water for 5 years.
Right.
So that's what I base my intention of doing that, following through on the good faith that the county exhibited there.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that explanation.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Do you anticipate any more coming down the road do you have any other negotiations going on?
No, we don't, and we don't need to because we're meeting our 10% requirement here.
Gotcha.
Okay, public comment then on this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Edwards. And, this has come up many times. And frankly, I think it's been a waste of the public's time, and I blame the county for that. This really has become a joke, frankly, supported by one fictional statement after the other. The idea that this 10% was mitigation for displacing agriculture, I've been following that project for decades, and that's pretty much the first time I've heard of it, so I'm not buying that. There is no seawater intrusion mitigation for these folks on the top. There's none. The good one may pump a little bit of water, but it's infinitesimal. The contracts have an express termination provision that allows the county to cancel the contracts or terminate them 5 years after the execution, as you just heard. They could do it today. The idea that the 10% allotment for ag is an unchangeable, cast in concrete coastal condition is ridiculous. I think it would probably qualify for a minor amendment that the executive director could sign off on. Probably wouldn't even need to go to the commission for any kind of hearing. It could be reported to the hearing as a minor amendment. So, again, the county, frankly, has wasted my time, wasted the public's time. I don't know why the obsession with this 10% delivery. It makes no sense to me. Why the fiction? I just don't understand it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindy Owen again. The whole reason that we put a sewer in was because we had nitrates, remember? And then the reason that we were going to recycle the water is so that we could save our basin. So the water, the 10%, was to offset ag pumping. There's no other way to twist it and turn it, even though you've done a good job. The water is to stay in the ground, and the recycled water is to go to those farmers. Now, the quality of the water appears to not be what the farmers want. How about the cemetery? That's a huge amount of water being pumped out of there to keep that green. It's right there. You are charging, everybody in the prohibition zone is paying to put pipes up to those 4 farmers. And then you're asking them to put their infrastructure in. You're charging them, I think it's 1/10 of what you're charging our school district. There's something terribly wrong here, and I'm offended every time I have to listen to Mr. Gibson's explanation about how the county is meeting its Coastal Commission requirements. You are not. There's no water going to many of the other places it could be going. And is it the quality of the water? Again, if you can fix the quality of the water and the farmers will take it, it's a win-win. It will have met the whole goal of recycling the water. Morro Bay is looking at dumping it in the ocean again because it's expensive. Well, it's expensive and we're paying for it, and you're giving practically free water to 4 farmers who never used that water before. That is not the intent of what the Coastal Commission put in with recycled water. What about our recycled water? We've asked and asked and asked about any kind of local recycled water that we might have available for tree planting, some projects we have around town that we desperately need some extra recycled water. Nothing has been done about that. No comment. I'm really tired of listening to this, promise that you are meeting the requirements of saving our basin by giving dryland farmers all the water that you were supposed to give as an offset.
Thank you.
I'm Don Warden, and I am representing the County Farm Bureau, who has asked that you continue the recognition of the disposal of treated effluent for ag use and overlying the basin as part of various mitigations that you've heard about already. And that we would like to request that you keep it at 10% of the total effluent that is produced for ag. As a side comment, I would think that ag, by its nature, is perhaps a little slow in responding to changes in water use. And certainly there was a lot of interest and discussion about it in this particular case, and visits to Monterey, et cetera. But I think that there are a number of conditions that have affected their agriculture's view of the project. However, now I believe that with some of the contracts completed, at least one, that they see what the county's intent is and that they are serious about this. I think that there are, at least I know of one particular individual who overlies the basin with a heavily irrigated agricultural program that is interested, and whether or not he continues to and applies or not, I'm not sure. But I think that over some additional time that perhaps you will see more interest from agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Margetson. Mark, doesn't this remind you of when the school board contracts came out and the spin from the county? You didn't even know about it when that happened. Now all of a sudden we've got this new information. I would hope you just would not stand for this. There's no mitigation factor. They're trying to find the best way to distribute this water. Zero mitigation is the best way? There's no other option. And the reason the farmers may be interested down the road at $100 an acre foot for the first few acre feet and $75 after that, that's a pretty sweet deal to get these guys even to come on board. That's part of the reason some of them are probably on board. This is a losing proposition for the wastewater project, for the people in this community that are paying for the project. It costs way more than $100 or $75 to bring it from Los Osos to the plant, treat it, and pump it out to the dryland farmers. And as a board member, can you imagine one of you sitting on the Coastal Commission, this issue coming before you with the basic points? Zero mitigation. We need an adjustment in the condition. Their purview is to maximize impact on seawater intrusion where they can. And this does nothing for it? You don't think that's an amendment that gets passed unanimously by the board? If it even ends up at the board, I think Jeff's right. I think this is probably done internally with the director of the Coastal Commission signing off on it. I don't even know if it ends up at the board unless it's on consent calendar. But I'd like to hear a commissioner, Coastal Commissioner, argue for keeping this the way it is. Mistakes happen. I believe this is just the county's just dug in and they're just not going to admit they made a mistake here. And we're willing to make an adjustment. This project of delivering this water to those dryland farmers, we will never, ever, ever, into infinity, recoup the cost of delivering that water to them at $100 or $75 an acre feet. Ever. It's a drain on the ratepayers of this community. And it should at least deserve a discussion with the Coastal Commission. I think it's a slam dunk. I think you make the appropriate argument, it's a slam dunk.
Thank you.
Chuck Cecina speaking as a private citizen. I have to echo just about everything you've heard so far.
Could you speak up? I don't think they can hear you.
Okay. I have to echo just about everything I've heard so far. If you read carefully the coastal permit, there are adaptive management clauses built into the sections that dealt with recycled water, just for this purpose. The conditions are so different. I don't have the time to go through Mark's memo and the CSD's response, but if you point by point go through those, I do not know how you can stand by the county's position that this is the right thing to do to our basin. I don't know when this project became a let's be good to ag project and not let's protect the groundwater basin. Sure, it's only 10 acre feet, but you just heard that there may be interest in more. And at the rates that we're giving it away, that is easy to see why. And again, this issue of the mitigation being linked to mitigation for the loss of ag land, that's almost apples and oranges mitigation. You're mitigating the loss of land by providing recycled water. I'm not sure that you can structure mitigation that way, and I'd like to see some documentation from the Coastal Commission that actually is part of this discussion. We've never seen any documentation regarding discussions with the Coastal Commission, but then we never got a response from the county to the CSD letter either, and that maybe is the most galling part of all this.
Barry Brannon, I'm a farmer. I own the property right next to the existing wastewater treatment plant. I was at all the county hearings. I was there when the Ag Commissioner made their presentation to the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Gibson is absolutely accurate in the statement. The question was they were taking viable agricultural land, and the state law says when you take that, there is mitigation required. And the mitigation was 10%. At that time, the engineering group said that there would be 1.2 million gallons a day of effluent. The problem doesn't lie with the county. The problem lies with a lot of people, a lot of finger pointing. The design was a little overstated. The recapture of the groundwater was never really included. But the county did not make an error. The supervisor did not make an error. They did exactly as the law requires, and I thank Mr. Gibson for speaking clearly.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to respond to any other questions that my colleagues at the table here have. We've had a few commenters make a number of very familiar assertions here in the public comment period. A number of those assertions simply aren't grounded in fact, and the rest of those assertions I covered in my comments before public comments. But again, if any gentlemen want further explanation, be happy to provide that.
Any questions?
So just one general comment. I think Mr. Warden mentioned that there was other farmers that were actively pumping that were interested in as these contracts come up, I think there's the benefits of operations there's other things that are involved here, but that the county would look at those and consider those. I think it would benefit the community, the overall, all the comments you heard. When those come available, if the county could consider those, that would be helpful.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
our intention. There are benefits to agriculture from the reliability of having a known waste, treated effluent stream. And I think we can consider, further interactions with the ag community for those that are actually pumping significant quantities. Ag exchange is part of Program D, and something that we're certainly interested in developing. So, there's lots of opportunity ahead. This is by no means the end of the story on this.
I had a question, Rob, maybe you can answer this. In your staff report, did you prepare Exhibit A to your staff report, or where'd that come from?
No, the county provided that.
Okay. It says the Goodwins have installed most of the infrastructure to connect to the system. Are they installing it at their expense, or is the county installing it at our expense? I just need a clarification of that, because that was a question that came up during public comment.
My understanding is that the Goodwins are installing on their side of the property their own infrastructure.
And part of the wastewater.
One at a time, please. Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Part of the wastewater project was to extend a purple pipe out into the general area where we expected these to do, and that was at the cost. Part of this is also a disposal issue. So the county appropriately, included these costs as one of a number of means of disposal of effluent. And so the county infrastructure exists, private infrastructure exists on private property.
I just have one other comment.
Please, go ahead.
We talked about the S&T in the delivery to Sea Pines Golf Course. You mentioned it here, which is inside the S&T service area. So we had some discussions with S&T. We really never came to a final conclusion on that. What we decided is that let's not go down that path and delay this contract. Let's go ahead and initiate these contracts, and we just didn't want to halt. That was our first opportunity to deliver recycled water to the community. We don't want to get into some litigation or any type of debate on where that property line went.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That is a very important place to mitigate seawater intrusion, and even in the upper zone, they pump a lot of water from the upper zone.
Okay. Anything else at this point? From speaking as a director of the CSD, I would think it'd be helpful, and that the letter that we sent, that at least there be a point-by-point response, because, like was mentioned, Mark's letter predated that letter. So I think if there's pending issues in there, at least if we could get a response to that, I think would be helpful.
Let me look it over, and we'll see what we can do about that.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll go to the last item on the agenda, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. Anybody in the public want to speak for something that's not on the agenda?
After you burn a pen. Hi, my name's Gary Walker, and I'm a resident of Las Osas. These last couple of days, watching the amount of water run out of this basin area hurts my feelings. And the commissioner who's here from the Community Service District keeps talking about delaying and delaying and delaying. We need to get moving on catching that water that's here. It's a substantial amount in these rainy times, and you can't help but watch. And those creeks are beautiful now, but you see that water going straight up to the ocean. And I think you guys could prioritize that differently. I know you've got grants and lots of reasons not to, but as you see time pass, a huge amount of water passes, and it won't be here. We're still in a drought kind of life here. We're never going to have too much water, so let's gather it while we have it.
Lindy on again. In France, they install, because they have pretty much steady rainfalls, they have what are called water towers. So just like our water tanks, they're set up to capture river flow that's excessive. And we might look at what those cost. I don't know what a huge, a tank the size of this room, and then a method to direct it into the tank would be interesting, and maybe that's where California will go. There's also bladders. They're gigantic rubber waterbed type things that you can put water in. And we have had a lot of rain this year. I personally, we are not out of our drought time, and we will see this summer we'll be using a lot of this water to put out fires. So I don't think we should ever sit and think that we are ready to start building out at all. Just a reminder, the people inside the prohibition zone, we can't really build, we can't hardly add on. We pay for the cleanup of the groundwater that basically anybody that uses a septic tank has been polluting the same way that we polluted, but we're just we got drawn into a circle. And so again, when we try to defend the careful use of our water and, for instance, the reuse of the water so that we can stop seawater intrusion and be able to reuse nitrated water and water that we can salvage by using the wastewater to offset the pumping. That's one of the main reasons I think a lot of us come, is we're concerned that it's all done correctly. Long ago, there was a better opportunity to put a much better designed sewer in, but the county did not want to go that direction. Again, I'm going to ask the questions. I'll probably have to bug you till you're gone, Rob. But do you have a rough estimate of how many years at current use our basin is sustainable at current use? And I have you keep working on that. I know that it's a hard one. And then, again, I would like Mr. Gibson to tell us what the annual estimate of the private wells, the 500 private wells in our basin, how much water are they using? Where's that information? And how do you collect it? I think that's about it. I appreciate that we have an honest discussion about our water basin. It's we're not willing to listen to some of the what Mr. Gibson just talked about. The Coastal Commission reuse of recycled water to offset currently used water is what it was. It wasn't ag, whatever you want to call it. Thanks.
She's got her timing down well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Edwards. And I wanted to mention that last Tuesday at the Board of Supervisors, they considered a 2-year summary report of their resource management system. I think this is something that this committee may want to take notice of. I did copy Golden State and the CSD. I'll have to get Charlie a copy of the letter that I wrote in connection with that agenda item. As I mentioned, the RMS is updated every 2 years, and it treats all of the resources throughout the county and the respective communities. But the one that is affecting this committee, obviously, is the water component. And at present, I would submit that the resource management system is oversimplified and is somewhat elementary. For example, as most people know, the water supply is considered level of severity 3, but the system is 0. There's no level of severity for system. And quite frankly, I think the system and the management of our basin is really what is the focus of our activities. There are some supply figures in your 2017 annual report. I'd like the committee to note that in the report, the estimated safe yield of the basin is 2,760 acre-feet. This is compared to a demand of approximately 2,100 acre-feet, a little bit more. So not only is the basin yield metric at 80, which is the target, but it's actually below. And at this present time, it's about 75. If we add one more Program C well, we will increase the safe yield of the basin, theoretically, to approximately 2,900 acre-feet. Our demand is continuing to decline. It's my projection that our full demand for the entire community within the next 2 to 3 years will be at 2,000 acre-feet per year. So that drops the basin yield metric to under 70. Yield is going up, demand is going down. This is what we want. So what I'm suggesting, and is outlined in my letter, is that the county update their resource management system for Los Osos water in an appropriate way. I've noted the differences in level of severity between water supply and system. I think that should be corrected. Moreover, there's no differentiation between the lower basin and the upper basin in the resource management system. I think that's also a critical distinction. We know that no problem. We know that the upper basin suffers from nitrates, the lower basin from seawater intrusion, so they are very different situations in terms of how to deal with the water. So the resource management system, I think, should be updated to reflect the current situation in Los Osos. Thanks. Thanks for the extra time.
Richard Margetson. I wasn't going to make public comment, but I'm not going to let Mr. Gibson's comment go unchallenged. And for somebody who was at every Planning Commission hearing on the wastewater project and every Coastal Commission hearing on the project, I challenge anybody to produce the tape where there was extensive discussion about delivering water to dryland farmers. There's no tape. There's no evidence of that. And Mr. Gibson did his usual. People came up and made assertions that aren't based in fact. You heard my comment. What in my comment was not factual? We're not delivering at $100 an acre foot, $75 an acre foot as you deliver more. The cost of running those lines to those farmers will be recouped at some point at $100 an acre foot when it's costing us maybe 5, 6, 7 times that just to treat the water that's being delivered to them. Tell me what in my comment was not factual. Otherwise, don't make those statements.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, I did have one thing that came up in the public comment here that I think when we talk about the JPA, Rob, you may want to look into. Okay. Because, and this has come up to the CSD, because there's certain areas in the community where there's flooding, but the CSD does not have those powers, okay? The drainage powers, that's a county issue. So as far as the JPA, if we're talking about gathering the stormwater and using that and recharging the basin with that, that's something that the county would have to do because they have the authority. The CSD cannot, nor can Golden State, nor can Sunset Terrace. But that may be something in that JPA discussions as far as outline of powers or activities that we may want them to pursue. The gathering of the water for recharge may be something because, like I said, these entities other than the county, we don't have those powers to do that.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Okay.
Good feedback.
All right, thank you. With that, then we'll be adjourned.
Thank you.